Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Wet Center webinar series, where we bring you speakers from a variety of backgrounds, all in support of ag and water tech ventures in the Valley. So today we are discussing overcoming obstacles for a brighter future in California agriculture. We'll be covering the discussion of water in the Valley, including SGMA and the perspective of a grower from the west side, Daniel here. In addition, we'll be going over topics such as sustainability, data collection, labor, agricultural technology trends, and more. So wherever the speakers want to take it, I'm sure we're going to have a great discussion today. Joining us is Ryan Jacobsen, CEO of the Fresno County Farm Bureau, and also host of the Valley's Gold on PBS. In addition, we have Daniel Hartwig, Resource Manager at Woolf Farming. Both of our speakers are undergraduates and MBA graduates at Fresno State, so go Dogs, great work guys. And then Ryan and Daniel will be leading the conversation. I'll be in the background. Answering Q&A through the chat. So just keep bringing them along throughout the webinar at any point, and I'll be reading them off to them intermittently. So Ryan, at that, I'll turn it over to you. And if there's anything you guys need, just let us know.
Thank you, Ben. Yeah, appreciate it. And I want to say a big hello. It looks like we have I got a ton of friends out there that I see they're on the participant list there as far as attendees today. So definitely appreciate seeing all of you and catching up at some point, hopefully in the face-to-face in the future. I mean, I think everybody wants to get back to face-to-face. So hopefully that's going to be soon. With that said, I'm going to give my little asterisk mark on my disclaimer. Daniel and I have known each other basically our whole lives. It goes back to our grandparents. We're friends with one another. Our parents have known each other their whole lives, and I've known each other for our whole lives. Went to swim parties at his house as a kid. He is, for those folks that don't know, he's probably not going to mention this in his bio, but he was a sugar beet grower at one time. The 4-H project. And so we've known each other for a long time. So this is pure Easton power right here. And for those of you that don't know that Easton is the center of the universe, it's right south of Fresno there. And so we literally were what 3 miles apart. I think I'm on Adams and Fig. He's on Valentine and Adams, give or take. And so happy to have Daniel here as my first time doing this with you guys. Daniel, anything else you want to add before we jump into some questions?
No, I think American Union Eagles and Bulldogs together as well. So, and I see Johnny's comment here about Kerman being the center of the universe, and I can't disagree with Johnny too much, but I have a strong preference towards Easton. So,
well, for those of you that don't know, Easton's the only place that is south of north, north of south, east of west, and west of south, west of east. We literally have all those roads right across from us, and we're right in the center of it. So, Johnny, we might disagree just a little bit there, but nevertheless, we still love our Kermans. We love all of the rural communities across the valley here, and we're going to be talking about those a whole lot here pretty quickly. So, Daniel, I thought the best place to start today has obviously been a very tumultuous year, not just across the U.S., across the whole economy, but within agriculture, we have our own issues. And so, let's begin with that 50,000 foot level view of like what's going on in the ag industry in general, what's specifically happening in your day job with Woolf, just in regards to specifically tying it to the pandemic and what we've seen in the markets.
Boy, that's a wide-ranging, broad question that take up the next hour or so. I guess I really dig into that. But yeah, I mean the pandemic's played a really played havoc with a lot of the markets here. And if you're talking about the broader Fresno County economy, if you're talking about markets, what it's done to, for instance, the almond market, there's been a lot of trade issues. Some of that is related to the dollar, some of that's related to the pandemic. There's just a ton of issues. It's changed consumers buying power. So there's less money, and they're going to less restaurants, so that's changing around. The types of products that they're buying what you buy at the store is not the same product that folks are buying and eating at restaurants. So there's been a huge amount of upheaval within various markets. Again, like I said, there's a lot of root causes, but the pandemic's really created havoc within the markets, within the export markets, and as well as consumer patterns. On the ranch, what COVID's done for us as well is created a set of challenges where we have to, we're having to make sure, farming is pretty easy to social distance in a lot of senses, at least on our ranch, because, we've basically got one guy every 150 acres. So, on a day-to-day basis, that part of it's pretty easy to keep folks apart and keep everybody safe and separated. But, the challenge is, you still have to get guys together. You still have to do, trainings, for safety, tailgates, things like that. And that's created a lot of issues. You have to give guys, direction on where they're going in the mornings. And it's really, just kind of had to change the way we operate. The timing when we bring people in, whether you're staggering them, how you're staggering lunch breaks, just all those factors. COVID's just really kind of played havoc with what we're doing out here.
Yeah, and it's kind of, again, it's a very broad statement. We have 400 different crops in this county, so it's not the same for all crops. But generally speaking, we have seen a depression of commodity prices the last year.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you look at specifically the almond market. I'm an almond grower. I didn't really get into my background here too much, but I work for a larger farming company. We obviously are partners in an almond processor. But then my brother and I have 40 acres, that we farm together, and 20 of those are almonds. And we went from pricing last year in the 250 to 260 range, down to the 160 to 170 range. And I don't care who you are, if you take a 30% haircut in your pricing, that's going to have a huge impact to your bottom line. Yeah,
no, absolutely. And again, I'm trying to start generic so we can start drilling down to the issues, but I have the generic. What's keeping farmers and ranchers up at night? What are the big issues out there right now? I mean, and there's a plethora of them. There's plenty out there to talk about.
Probably the one that's keeping me up at night most right now is looking at Prop 15. That's kind of the most immediate challenge, I guess, so to speak. That's going to have a huge impact, to anybody's, everybody's bottom line. But from a farmer or rancher, if you have any, facilities, if you have any trees, any permanent anything on your land, your pumps, all that stuff, your tax base is going to change, and that's huge. I mean, we farmers operate on the smallest of margins, and any time that gets changed around, I remember thinking back to high school economics and then college economics. Farmers are a perfect competition. There is just a plethora of choices. So if our costs go up, there's not necessarily there's not a correlating price increase that gets passed on. So those costs get borne and eaten up by farmers, and that erodes our profit margin. So that's probably the initial thing that's on my mind, at least on that. I can expand on the plethora of other issues if you want, Ryan. That was kind of the first one that popped in my mind there.
Well, obviously, yeah, no, big one. And I'm glad you kind of talked about that, because that's one thing that most folks don't. I mean, if I was to take a poll, if I could put up a Zoom poll right now and ask how many people would be happy with a 1% long-term return on their investment, I'm assuming you wouldn't have a lot of takers. And from the ag perspective, long-term, the return is somewhere right around 1% on investments.
Yeah.
So it is definitely, when you look at the shrinking margins, and I think that's one of the generic things that we're going to take away from today's conversation is, I used to say prior to just a couple of years ago, there really wasn't a single law or regulation that was going to undo the California farmer. It truly was the death by 1,000 cuts. There's just so many different things. We are going to talk about SGMA, though, and SGMA by itself can be that death blow depending on what type of operation and where your operation is actually situated. But nevertheless, there is just such a significant amount of federal, state, and local regulation that just does all to collectively together make this a very difficult industry right now. And we're going to talk about some of those specific challenges there. One thing that's unique, and we're going to talk about your day job, Woolf. Woolf does span several different types of irrigation districts, but we also know that they are very highly centered there in the Westlands Water District. And when you talk water issues, particularly in California, it is probably a fair and accurate statement to say that Westlands has been right in the crosshairs, right in the middle of all that. Can you summarize, because I know I've probably got some people on this call that truly doesn't understand what's going on out there right now as far as the federal issues for the past decade?
Sure. I mean, and it even goes back a little bit further than the last decade. The last decade has been really exacerbated by by the drought that we had. That really kind of started in 2009 and really didn't end until 2017. The big challenge, if we want to go way back here, I mean, Westlands water comes from Northern California. The bulk of it comes out of Shasta and then gets stored in San Luis Reservoir. But in the process, it gets you have to go through the Sacramento San Joaquin Delta, and there's the environmental issues there. Except we can kill the next hour talking about that as well if you want. But There's a lot of challenges, in getting through the Delta. There's a lot of environmental restrictions. The laws have changed over the last few years that have made it more difficult to transfer water through there, which has, severely cut our allocations. And then because the allocations have been cut, folks have had to grow, have had to make choices to rely on that, groundwater resource that we have. And, with Sigma coming into play, it's really gonna, that's where it really starts to hurt you. Westlands gets allocated about, if you're growing Westlands, you get allocated 100%, you would get 2.5 acre-feet of water per acre. There's some crops that can be grown on that, but, if you're looking at, your higher value crops, you can't irrigate those on 2.5 acre-feet. So, that alone, that just right there is a challenge. But when over the last 10 years, on average, get, less than 40% allocation, that's only 1 foot of water. Well, there's pretty much nothing you can grow on 1 foot of water. And that's really the biggest challenge that we've had out here last decade, is just not getting that allocation that we need. Some of that is environmental factors, but a lot of it's driven by regulations and environmental, environmental regulations that are just preventing that water from coming, to where it's allocated.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And you obviously referenced it, but Sigma being such a significant issue, Westlands again being kind of in the crosshairs of that. I mean, we are talking about you hate to say this, Daniel, but the truth is there's winners and losers. There's folks that are probably not going to be too bad through Sigma, but there are folks that are going to truly potentially lose their livelihoods because of the significant cutbacks on that. I mean, what are you guys looking at? I mean, how do you try to balance this thing? I mean, it's a moving target. It's a moving target that's it's phased in over the next 20 years now. February 1st of this year was a big date. I mean, it was officially the start of Sigma, but those some of those benchmarks and timelines are coming very quickly.
Yeah, for instance, Westlands will start restricting pumping to 1.3 acre-feet per acre in 2022. So that's next year already. So Westlands is really kind of at the forefront of those cuts. I know that where you're director, or president, I should say, of the board at FID, it's a little bit longer time frame because it's not the same level of groundwater, issue there, and a much better reliability of surface supplies. But Westlands is right at the forefront of this. I mean, the growers out here are looking at, having to make difficult choices here, starting, this upcoming year already. So it's right before us, and like I said, by 2030, we're going to be down to 0.6 acre-feet per acre. That's basically about 7 inches of water that you're going to be allowed to pump kind of on balance over the course of any year. So it's right in front of us. You talk about winners and losers. Westlands is going to be it's a much tougher environment out here than in some other water districts.
Yeah. And we can't be on a Zoom call talking, being hosted by the Wet Center and not talk about the significant investment in water technology that's occurred. I mean, I do tell people continually that, a lot of folks used to look to the Middle East as kind of the leaders in some of this water technology, but it truly is now Fresno County, California. Talk about over the, just the last decade, 2 decades, what you guys have done to use every precious drop of water.
Sure. I mean, we've invested a lot of money, on a per acre basis here, investing in drip technology on all of our trees. They're on drip irrigation now. All of our tomatoes, all of our crops. We've even started growing wheat on buried drip systems as well. We've changed around some of our spacing to get away from the sprinklers that we need to do that. And we're actually able to grow the same crop on drip. You don't have any wind or evaporation or evaporative losses by burying your drip tape, and that which has in turn impacted our tomato as well. We've had to change our row spacing there as well to really make sure that we're able to keep our rotation going, but to also minimize our water usage. And we've cut our water usage down from if you go back 15 years ago and you look at it, we've cut our water use by about 30%, I believe, a little bit more than that, from how things were done even maybe 15 years ago. And we were able to grow more. I mean, you're talking about going from maybe a 40-ton crop to a 60-ton crop potentially on less water. So those are a lot of steps that folks in Westlands are taking, and us on this ranch are taking, is to really try to stay ahead of it and maximize the amount of water we have. And at the same time that, by making that conversion, I'll give you a good transition here, Ryan. It does help us with our labor situation as well, by not having to move sprinkler pipe out of the field as well. With the shortages that we're seeing out here also, and the rising cost of minimum wage, by having that the drip system buried into the field, it does help minimize the amount of labor that we have and the folks that that we aren't always able to get.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And before I leave the water topic, I think it's important to talk about. We talk a ton about. I mean, the real attention getter is the water supply issues, the quantity issues. I mean, we know that is a driving force here in the Valley, but we have some significant water quality challenges or regulatory issues that we're dealing with that we didn't deal with just a few years ago. Talk about a few of those.
Sure. I mean, starting in 2015, we had to start, reporting all of our nitrogen usage and having to make sure that and report what we're doing, where it gets reported to the local, water quality agencies. But we have to report our yields and our nitrogen usage, and that shows, how efficient we are at pulling nitrogen out of the soil. But you're also, taking the steps to test your soil to see how much nitrogen is in there existing. And then, as a grower, you're trying to mine that nitrogen that's existing in the field as well from the plant materials, the waste, as those break down, they're putting nitrogen back into the soil also. We're taking those steps to improve, that ground quality. One of the other things if you talk about, soil, quality, groundwater is not as good as surface water. So as we're putting additional groundwater on here, we're adding salt loads and other constituencies to the soil, and it really does hurt. It really does hurt the soil long term if you don't have long term surface water supply, because you are degrading the soil to some degree. Going back to just something that I was thinking about in regards to water as well. A lot of growers out here are trying to make investments as well to try to recharge water when there are flood flows available. To make sure that we can put that water back underground and store it under there. There's not a whole lot of dam progress being made, so to speak, on getting things getting additional above ground storage, and so growers are investing a lot of money, whether it's trying to recharge just through percolation basins or direct recharge, or even in Westlands as well. One of the things that folks are doing is even putting water down through their groundwater wells. Which you would have never thought about how many every years ago is putting water backwards down your wells, and so that's something that they're doing as well. So
yeah, no, absolutely. And like I said, I know we could spend a whole episode or mini episodes just on the water situation there, because it does continue to drive everything we do, and I think that's our message. I mean, obviously my message for wearing my Farm Bureau hat, I mean, and I know your message that we help to spread. I mean, it does take water to grow our food. I mean, even the basic, need for water, it's inclusive of the crops that it takes to grow our food. I mean, one of the statistics that always amazes me, every single human on the face of the earth, we don't talk about this very often, but every single human on the face of the earth, on average, eats 900 gallons a day through their food supply. And when 900 gallons, I mean, we're talking significant, because historically we talk about water in the context of what we use in a household, what we use for the shower, what we use for outdoor watering, but we don't talk about the context that it does take water, even if it's just, dryland farming, it does take water still to grow that food there. And the California farmer puts this water to the best and highest use, arguably in the world, just simply because of some of the innovations that Daniel's been talking about there, and obviously with the wet center and everything, all the other centers that Fresno State, are able to accomplish through this water technology side. So I think it is something that we talk about it a lot, but it really is genuinely important to our day-to-day lives as far as trying to grow the crops that feed the world. Daniel, you made a segue. Let's go to labor. Yeah. Labor is a challenge, and there really is broken up into two supplies. And one of the things I failed to mention is Daniel does have an advocacy background to him. Not only did he spend some time with the ag organization for several years, working on a lot of labor issues. He also, you're talking to a guy that just was elected the Fresno County Farm Bureau president about 17 hours ago, I guess maybe not even that at this point. And so wears different hats and has this advocacy side. But the labor side supply, there is really two issues to it. It's the availability supply, and as well as you got to talk about it, the cost side. California is a whole lot more expensive than other places that we're competing against.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely true. I mean, we're looking at in about a month and a half, what are we, October 23rd, in about 2.5 months, we're going to be looking at a $14 minimum wage here. And that's huge. I mean, every extra dollar that goes out per hour, that's a huge expense, for us as employers. But at the same time, the legislature has saw fit to reduce the amount of hours that agricultural employees can work. And so at the end of the day, they're not making any more money than they would. So but I think about our employees. I think I'm close to the city of Huron, and I hear from from our guys here that as soon as the land their landlords here, the minimum wage went up, they increased the rent on these folks. And at the same time, they're not taking any extra dollars home because the hours are coming down, at the same time. So their take home's the same, but their rents are going up because the minimum wage goes up. And it's a really vicious cycle for a lot of these employees, to be able to afford, to live at the same level. You talk about the availability of labor. I think about my time in Nisei Farmers League, the previous ag organization that Ryan referenced there. Dealing with a lot of issues there with Manuel Cunha, and Ryan, how long? And you have a background in this as well. I mean, we've been advocating, as at farm bureaus and other organizations, been advocating for ag labor reform for 20 plus years, and it always gets so far and then it stops. It's just enough to give you a glimmer in your eye that maybe good times might be around the corner, and then it just stops. It just stops kind of dead in its tracks. So with that in mind, we have fewer hours and fewer employees, and we have to try to get done more with less, essentially, and that just creates a huge amount of issues for that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it is worth mentioning. I mean, because I'm thinking there's a possibility we have some students on this call. I may be wrong, but if there's some students on there, there's a very good likelihood that most of them or all of them were born after the last time this country had immigration reform. The last immigration reform in this country was 1986. And so that was the Immigration Reform and Control Act, signed under President Reagan. Obviously was a very big deal at the time it was passed, but something that obviously Manuel Cunha famously mentions all the time is the fact that even at that time, President Reagan said that this was only the start, not the ending, that we needed to have continued discussions and legislation on this issue. Here we are going back 34 years, and we still have not had any other major reforms to that system there. And so it is not a secret. I mean, it's important for us to have this discussion about the fact that approximately 90% of California's agricultural workforce is foreign born. It has nothing to do with their immigration status, just the fact that they are born in a country other than the United States. Obviously, a significant amount of those, there are challenges with their documentation. This is an issue that quite honestly, the ag industry is not the only issue here. I mean, we're talking about an economy where the ag side is actually, somewhere in the neighborhood of approximately, the challenges to documents is somewhere in the neighborhood of 9 to 13 million nationwide. We really don't truly know the number, but well under 1 million of those are actually employed in agriculture. So they're employed in all other facets throughout the economy, whether it's the service industry, the restaurant industry, but yet ag has been the one that's kind of been the face of this, has been the one that's been very vocal about it, because we want a solution. We want a solution that works both for this country, as well as our partner countries, as well as the individuals that are affected by it. Daniel, let's get a little more about cost. You talked about the $14 an hour, but we also have the workers' comp challenges that a lot of other places don't have. We're having, surcharge after surcharge and this charge. I mean, it truly is. And there's this misnomer that we only pay minimum wage within the ag industry. And I think it's the indexing, the pushing up of other wages that also are worth a conversation here as well.
Yeah, no, that's true. I mean, like I said, we actually don't, I'm trying to think, directly here, very, very few of our folks are at, minimum wage. A lot of them are, at least, 50 cents and above, and you would think you might see some compression, right? That maybe the folks at, a little bit higher level might stay the same, but everybody has that same expectation. And so it just keeps moving everything up. So it's, all of your hourly employees are moving up at that same level. And by going up $1 at a time, and then plus we can't forget that it goes up, it's going to go up, it's indexed to inflation. So, it doesn't just stop at $15. It's going to keep going up, roughly 50 cents a year, every year beyond that. So it's a huge increase from that standpoint. And then, workers' comp is actually indexed, based on your percentages or based on your payroll. So when your payroll costs go up, your workers' comp goes up alongside of it. And that just, it just keeps adding and compounding on top of those additional costs that you might see on an hourly basis anyway.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that's one thing that's, I think a lot of folks don't understand is that you just talked about a 30% cutback just on the almond side. You just talked about there's these costs that we were talking last night, the irrigated lands regulatory program, the domestic well testing. I mean, that's going to be, depending on the size of your organization, could be a few $100s to a few thousands of dollars. All of these just continue to tick away at the what was already a fairly thin margin. That's making it more difficult, and it's worth the mentioning the fact that the state has been highly supportive, it seems like, of trying to, of the small farmer, the medium-sized farmer, but it really does. They are the ones driving this consolidation that we're seeing, just because it really, you have to be able to spread those risks.
Well, and beyond that, Ryan, I mean, you need to have, you almost need to have a full-time person to deal with these regulatory issues. I mean, if you're a, 100, say you're a 200, 300 acre grower, in theory, you should be, doing all right for yourself. But if keep in mind, if you're an owner operator, you have to wear a hat, like you have to be a part lawyer, part recruiter. You have to be a regulatory specialist. You have to know everything about pesticides. You have to be an applicator. You're doing all of these things and wearing all these different hats. I think one time I put together a list, and what a farmer in Fresno County, how many agencies they might encounter. And I believe the number was 88. I think in the course of a year, as a grower, as a farmer, you might encounter 88 government agencies that you might have to deal with in the course of your business. And I mean, who has time to do that? I mean, there's just so much paperwork. I think back to when I was a kid, and don't let my hairline fool you. I mean, it wasn't that long ago here I remember watching. My dad would he would sit down a couple times a month. My grandpa would handle the books. But my dad would handle the paperwork side of things. All of his pesticide reporting and all the things you have to do there. And I mean, it was a couple hours, in the course of a month that he would have to do that. And, now that's not even realistic. I think if you're an owner operator, you're spending, more than half of your time, not even on the farm, just trying to deal with the paperwork side of things. So it going back to your original point here, it pushes the smaller guys out because of these regulatory policies, is that you cannot do all the things you need to do to stay in compliance and still try to farm at the same time. It's just not feasible, where you have to hire somebody specific to handle all that, which again, your profit margins aren't that great to begin with. It just, the regulations really, really hurt the small guys more than they do the big guys. Yeah,
no, absolutely. And Daniel, you discussed a little bit earlier, but I think it's worth driving down a little bit further. The tariff issue. I mean, that has affected us here in the Valley. We produce more food than we can consume domestically, and or even particularly within California, but domestically as the U.S. Trade is a big issue for us. And with an operation like you guys, I mean, yeah, that's when these tariff issues have had bottom dollar effects on your operation the last 2 years. Yeah, I mean, like I said, when we're not huge players in the export market per se on the tomato side of things, but on the almonds, it's for the industry, it's a huge thing to be able to export your product. And these wars back and forth just it erodes buying power because of all the tariffs on there. So the folks in other countries can't go out and buy as many products as they would otherwise, which turns around there's less markets than that we can sell to. And there's less volume being purchased overseas, because of those tariffs.
all that does is just, shrink the price that we can get back as growers. It's, it just, goes back to the idea of death by 1,000 cuts. And if, even if you're talking about, 10 or 20 cents, on the dollar for each pound you're talking about, it just adds up quite a bit.
Yeah, no, for sure. One of your other hats you wear, you also serve on a committee, if you want to say, over at the Air District. And obviously the Air District, I mean, it's a great partnership. I do from a business perspective. I mean, obviously they are a regulatory agency, but we are committed as an industry, as an ag community, of trying to get to cleaner air. We have challenges in this basin. Can you just talk overall, about the investment that ag has made into cleaner air, and but it also has a true cost and effect on ag operations throughout the valley?
Yeah, the Air District's, I think there's kind of a love-hate relationship sometimes with the Air District, and that nobody likes being regulated, and nobody, especially the last few years when some of the the burning situations went away, where you couldn't burn your crops, but farmers are adaptable, and we've made the adaptations that we've needed to help clean up the air, and that's been evidenced over the last few years of of our air quality improving by every metric here. What farmers are doing in partnership with the Air District and ARB and some of these other agencies is taking some of these incentive dollars, and we're being able to invest in replacing diesel engines, whether it's on a pump or in trucks and things like that, in tractors. I mean, that's been a huge one. Is trying to stay ahead of the regulations there, and the Air District has really invested in us as growers. And we've in turn put those, put that money, and I'm thinking about Johnny here, since I saw his hand raised earlier too. Johnny, and I should, I guess, acknowledge NRCS as well, and their role that they play in helping fund some of these projects. But we have really made great strides in getting a lot of the higher. You're welcome, Johnny. Trying to get the higher polluting tractor engines and pump engines out of our fleets and off of the farms. To really improve air quality. And I think that's been a really great collaboration that so many ag district or ag groups or ag organizations, like NISE, like cotton ginners and growers and Farm Bureau, groups like that have done a really, really great job in just in improving our air quality. Yeah,
no, absolutely. And I think that's it truly is a success story. I mean, I know it's very difficult to think of during this wildfire season, where the air, I think we would all agree, has been absolutely miserable. In fact, in my background there, you can see some N95 masks. I mean, we've done here at this Fresno County Farm Bureau, we've given out over 500,000 N95s, somewhere in the neighborhood of 300,000, give or take, surgical disposable masks for COVID, because of just how bad the air quality has been. And we're thankful the state's partnered with us on that whole issue there. But truly, the air in this valley has got cleaner. It's not one of those things that's acknowledged enough. But a lot of that contribution has come from agriculture, and we're proud of what we've done. It's just been a very expensive endeavor to get there, but thankfully we've had federal and state partners to help us. Daniel, one thing that I know that's extraordinarily important to Woolf is the sustainability thing, and that's just, it is a buzzword. It's kind of cliche to say because it becomes such a buzzword, but talk about what we're seeing through the industry right now as far as sustainability, what that means to you, both individually and as far as an organization, and that there is a specific certification I know you guys are going through as well about that.
Yeah, I mean, sustainability is it's so funny because I think farmers are about the most sustainable business there is. We take care of the land. We have to, right? It's our lifeblood, and so we do a great job of taking care of the land, and we try to improve it, and we try to improve the resources around it. But in terms of getting the certifications that we need, there's a lot that goes into that, and a big chunk of that is just documenting what we're doing and how we're doing it. And for us, that's involved a really big partnership with Fresno State to help us develop an environmental management system to help us really track all of our metrics, help us track our carbon footprint, our emissions, our water usage, the amount of recycling that we do. And it's really, again, kind of amazing because I think farmers do a really great job of being sustainable and taking a lot of these steps because it's the right thing to do, and and like I said, we don't always give ourselves enough credit. And a big part of sustainability is, making sure that you're just keeping track of the things you're doing. And that's where the partnership with Fresno State has really, benefited us, and it helps us, validate the metrics that we're doing. It helps us validate, our water savings and the amount of water usage that we've been able to improve by. The folks there at the Wet Center and Laura, I'm forgetting exactly. You can probably pop in here. I forget exactly which hat you're wearing here, but yeah, the folks there have really helped us kind of validate that. In terms of what does sustainability mean to us, it's really just it's a mindset. It's a mindset of being as it's just a mindset of trying to be as effective with our resources as possible. The good Lord's blessed us with only so many resources on this earth, and so it's just a matter of using those effectively and efficiently as we can.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I wanted to talk about, so I got two more questions, and then we'll jump to questions from the audience here. What else do you see on the horizon for California agriculture? I know none of us have the crystal ball, because if we did, I don't think we'd both be paid a whole lot more than we are right now, because things are changing in this world so quickly, and trying to stay up with it has been a difficult task. But what do you kind of see? I mean, is there things that, we know California ag's changing. We know that there's going to be additional regulation, but what is that, and how does that face of ag change compared to what we see today?
Well, I think the face of ag changes, and that I think you're going to continue to see, as long as the regulatory environment doesn't change, you're going to see greater consolidation. And it's kind of hard to imagine that it could consolidate even more, but I think you're going to end up seeing probably kind of a picture of folks that work full time and farm a little, farm 20-40 acres on the side, and that's kind of their gig there. And then you're going to see large farms, because right now, our state's policies and to some degree our federal policies are pushing out the middle class, so to speak. It's it's that death by 1,000 cuts, and frankly, not a lot of I remember one time my dad told me, when I was probably a teenager, he goes, "I don't know if you want to go into farming, son. I just don't know if it's if you want to deal with all the headaches and everything." And I don't know if I should have listened or not, but here I am, and like I said, I'm bullish on the future, production and our ability to feed the world. But I think the face of who's doing that is just going to change, and it's just going to see a different spin on it.
Yeah, and to be fair, I mean, both you and I are quote unquote old enough now to, we went through the 01, 03 Great Depression that our families both suffered through, and a lot of families, you take that singular event, changed our area, changed our valley so much, because just so many, what was the traditional 20 to 40 acre farmer, we lost so many of them just during a 3-year period because of how tough things got, and it continues to get tougher.
Well, and thinking about the great thing, that's, you keep driving. Anytime you drive out, drive around the countryside, that's all it takes to see. What's changing is, you keep seeing grapes, come out as we get to the end of harvest season now, and the raisins get picked up, and I drive around and I see, more and more imposts, coming out of the ground. I see more and more wires cut, and that all that signals to me is that those grapes are about to come out of the ground. The bad thing is there's not. If you're looking from a profitability standpoint, I don't know what you plant right now. The almond market is quite down. Maybe it's pistachios, but I just don't even know my wife asked me a couple months ago, well, Daniel, what do you think we should plant if we had some open ground? What should we plant? I go, I don't know what the answer is right now. It takes a lot of capital to get to the 7 or 8 years it takes you to start harvesting pistachios. And that's the one thing that seems to be doing pretty well right now, but it takes a lot of capital to get there. You have to be able to withstand not having any income for 8 years. And that's really, really tough to do. So I'm bullish that we're going to be able to feed the world. But again, I just think the face of who's doing it is going to be different.
Yeah. And before we take questions here, I want to end on a high point. I'm a really obviously big proponent, just with my involvement with Fresno State and everything else. I'm sure we have some students on here let's just end there is still some positive in this industry. There's some reason to be optimistic. What's your perspective?
The reasons to be optimistic, I think it is the, what's that?
I was just saying, what is some of that optimism that you know?
No, I think it's the youth. I mean, we have a great team out here. We have a kind of a mix, at Woolf, farming, we have a kind of a great mix of folks, and, some of our, younger crop managers just come in and have such a, a passion and such an enthusiasm, and great new ideas. I mean, it seems like, every week, we're talking about, just different ways to do things. And that goes back to the idea of doing more with less. And so I really do think that, to your point, the students on here, come with your best ideas, because, those new ideas are really what's going to drive, the future of agriculture here.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, I got two questions to begin with, Daniel. The first question I have is regarding SGMA. Any new federal programs regarding surface water that it says is helping, that's helping?
So the president, did sign in coordination, to help coordinate agreements between the folks that that manage the environmental side, and the Bureau of Reclamation manages the water side. So that is helpful. I think we saw last year, that we did actually get a little bit more water than we otherwise might have forecasted getting. So that's helpful. It's just, there's a lot of feet dragging, and the state is not necessarily, helping with this by filing lawsuits to fight against, what the federal government's trying to do. So, and depending on how the election, turns out here in the next, in the next 2 weeks here, some of that could get undone too, and that's something to be concerned about.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Good question. Great question here. Why do you think, what do you think is the driving force behind the high land prices, even with low prices and export challenges?
Well, land prices are just variable, and a lot of it just has to do with water availability. So if you grow up, kind of where Ryan and I did in Fresno Irrigation District, the water tables for groundwater are pretty high. There's a fairly robust system of getting surface water. They have a great recharge program that they're doing as well to help replenish the groundwater. And so that when you factor that in, my water costs, for instance, on the east side of the valley are probably on average maybe a tenth of what we pay on the west side. So it's a huge, it's a huge cost difference when you start thinking about it. It's like I have to produce so many more nuts, on almonds, just to be, equal on the cost side. And so that's why you see such high land prices, especially on the east side of the valley.
Yeah, absolutely. Ben, you have questions? Any questions?
We have one more that just popped up in Q&A from Mike. I do have one. We will talk about technology just a little bit.
Perfect. Okay, I just saw, yep, just got Mike's here.
Okay.
So hi everyone, and thank you for enlightening the conversation on various issues. I'd like to comment on SGMA. It was mentioned that flow restrictions are starting as early as 2021. Can someone comment on the status of groundwater agency pumping plans? To what degree are folks working together on establishing guidelines?
That's for me. So
I'll fill those blanks in.
So yeah, no, they're the groundwater the GSAs, which is Groundwater Sustainability Agency, and they create GSPs, which is the Groundwater Sustainability Plans. They have to coordinate with each other, and they you can't necessarily, if you're in a neighboring GSA, you can't claim water that might be going to this district. And so they all have to be able to work together and kind of mesh and commingle when they, I guess maybe I kind of lost my train of thought there. What is the specific question on that? How is that affecting things, Brian? Is that what?
Well, it's basically how are the agencies working together on the plans?
Okay, so yeah, there a lot of them. Yeah, a lot of them they're coordinating their meeting. Yeah, they have to because when those plans get submitted to the Department of Water Resources, the state agency, those plans have to be in agreement. So they are, to my understanding, they all are coordinating and working together to make sure that, things are legal. I do know in some other counties there's been some heartburn. I think Madera County, there was one agency there that refused to go along, and it's kind of jeopardizing. And maybe if anybody else is a better expert on Madera, feel free to weigh in here. But that's creating a lot of friction up there with their district, which is again one more reason that everybody kind of has to work together. I think we'll go a lot further if everybody works together. I think if we're talking 10 years from now and the lawsuits are flying around, we're probably not going to like the results of that. Anytime we have to resort to legal maneuvering, there's just less opportunities to be collaborative and work together. So I do hope that at least locally here, that we're able to all the agencies are able to work together, because I think things go a lot further that way.
And one thing that's worth mentioning in this conversation, SGMA was tough. I mean, when it was passed in 2014, I mean, we obviously, for those of us that were in the know, I mean, there was a lot of concern, but there was a lot of benefits to SGMA the way it was written. And the way it was written was that it did establish this local control. And then it also gave a little bit of footing or guidance or leadership ability to the counties, because if a local agency does not take step, then the county agency can take over, or the county can take over and pull there. We're fortunate in Fresno County. We've had phenomenal leadership at the county level that has helped to bring together some of these unique attitudes and unique interests and brought them together to work on these issues, where I feel that we have been very collaborative here, that it's gone in the right direction. There's some tough choices, some tough conversations, but overall, when you consider the pressure we're under to do what we're doing, I feel like it's headed in the right direction. And I'm assuming you agree with that, Daniel?
Yeah, no, I do agree. Like I said, attending the meetings, and you don't always, hear what how the sausage got made at, in the other conversations here. But I do think that the groups are working together. I do think, Ryan, how many GSAs are there in Fresno? Is there 7? 6?
It's 7 or 8. I think it might be 8. But yeah, we're less. And then there's counties that have 20 or 30.
Yeah.
It's
at least easier to get folks in the same room and start working towards a solution. But again, it's really tricky, and it's really difficult. And you're talking about people's lives. And so I do think that there's that a certain amount of jurisprudence that all of these agencies need to go in with, and realize that you have the impact to really significantly impact people's lives and their livelihoods.
We have a fantastic question from Ahmad here. Ahmad. Top 3 challenges that someone in technology can help with. And I love this disclaimer: accept more rain and have politicians listen to farmers and people.
Well, if I had a ray gun for that, like I said, to Ryan's point earlier, if we had all the answers there, we'd all be millionaires here. So top 3, boy, that's challenging. I think water is always a big one. I think better ways to automate and kind of take away some of our energy challenges. It's something we didn't really get into today, but again, energy costs are huge, and so if we can find a way to help manage some of those energy costs, whether again it's through automation or maybe changing some of the timing of irrigation, that technology is out there. I think it can always be improved, or I think the cost could certainly come down to make it more feasible for folks to adopt it. I think one of the big issues we run into out here is we do have a bit of an older workforce. We talked about labor before as well. And we do have kind of an aging workforce. I mean, as Ryan talked about, the last time there was immigration reform was 1986. You might have some of the folks that were brought in under that. They're getting a little bit up there in age, and so it does take a little bit more time to train them on using some of this new technology. So to make it more user friendly, have better interfaces, and really the training aspect is what I find is one of the tricky things is to bring folks that might not be familiar with an app or even an app might be great, but if it's not user friendly, or if it has bugs, one of the things I've noticed in our we've rolled out a fair amount of technology out here, but sometimes things just aren't ready for prime time, and people will bring things to market and we, and then bring them out here, and we might try to implement them, and they just don't work. And one of the things I've noticed is when things don't work right away, people lose buy-in, and they don't want to use it, and it just basically ends up kind of in the junk pile, so to speak. So if folks that are bringing new technology to the plate, really vet and go through and work with universities, or come up with a proof of concept before you come up with your idea. The other thing, that to really think about is, and I appreciate that you asked the question, go to farmers and find out what they're looking for. I don't know how many times people knocked on my door and said, I have a great solution for you, for a problem that you didn't even know existed. Well, I mean, that's not really helpful to me, because you're trying to maybe, fit a square peg into a round hole, and that just doesn't work. So you really need to understand what people's problems are, and they might not know it right away. You might have to talk to them a lot to understand, their problems quite a bit. But showing up and saying, I've got the magic box that's going to fix everything, just really doesn't work very well in agriculture.
You've seen a lot of solutions looking for problems, haven't you?
Yeah, exactly. It doesn't work. Does it show on my face?
Yeah, well, no, I'm just, we've had these same conversations though. I mean, because you guys, particularly being on the leading edge of so much, you have a lot of folks that come to you, but it's really trying to separate the fact from fiction. And you, I know we've talked, you have a lot of solutions that are just looking for those answers. And it's just, that's not the way that it needs to go about. And that's one thing that I think we appreciate, having the Fresno State side with the more practicability versus what we love our partnership with Silicon Valley on some stuff, but a lot of times it is, they have a solution that we're not necessarily looking for at this time. So
yeah.
Ben, I want to make sure you get your question in.
Yeah, just from the perspective, Daniel Ahmad asked a great question. You answered that great. I'd love to hear if you have any comments from the FID side. So any of the technologies that you're kind of thinking about or looking at. I know you offer a pretty unique perspective from that lens.
So you were asking specifically on FID. The interesting thing about FID is, for the longest time, ground, flood or furrow irrigation, kind of gets, poo-pooed a little bit in some senses. But it really does, help, benefit our groundwater. And so, I do think there's a place for, additional drip irrigation. But at the same time, if we're adding more drip irrigation, then we need to, add more recharge ponds and be able to monitor that, all the water that's going down, because it is critical to make sure that we are recharging our groundwater, everything that's underneath of our feet. Ryan, do you want to weigh in on FID? I'm trying to think if there was anything specific to FID.
Well, actually we do. I mean, I'll throw it out there. We do have specific requests. I mean, so FID, like Daniel said, we are a conjunctive use district. We purposely take excess flows in a wet year and put them into the ground to be stored for a drier year. We have soils that are extraordinarily conducive to that. Obviously, a lot of places on the west side, there are places, like Daniel said, that are very good for it, that are particularly within their farm's operation, but a lot of places are not conducive to that because the water just doesn't percolate. Here on the eastern side, we were able to do some really phenomenal things as far as getting water in the ground on wet years. Believe it or not, one of the areas that we need a solution for, there really is still not a cost-effective way on water measurement. There's lots of ways to get water measurement, but not cost effective, both long-term, midterm, short-term, that really help us as a district, because we're talking about, eventually we need to have volumetric measuring at all turnouts. Well, the district that Daniel's in, Westlands Water District, has had that for years because everything's pipelined. We still have a lot of open canals, open channel, very purposely, because we want to recharge when that water is going out there. But when you try to get 5,000, we have 5,000 turnouts, I think it is, as a district, and you start trying to find easy ways to measure, dealing with trash, dealing with a lot of other foreign objects, and just dealing with theft issues and everything else, there isn't a cost-effective way for us yet to really implement that on a wide scale basis. So we're still looking, hoping that a combination of technology and institutions will find some answers for us, but that's an area that we are definitely struggling in right now. And in addition to that, like I said, we continue to try to, there is the greatest of ironies in sense of like a district like ours, where we are seeing a heavy conversion over to technologies like drip or micro sprinklers and everything else. And that's hurting us as a district because we get less of that water going in the ground. So we're working with farmers to make sure they continue to keep their valves there situated so that during times when surface water is not available, they can use the groundwater. But we don't want them to exclusively go to groundwater because that doesn't help us in trying to get that excess flows into the ground when it's available. I'm sure many people on this call have heard of the name Don Cameron. Don's done some amazing research about trying to over-applicate water in almonds and vineyards during wet years so that we can get that water back in the ground. We're going to continue to do research like that so that we can work with our farmers to partner, because the best way we can get water in the ground is using their ground during those wet years to try to percolate down as quick as possible.
One more thing too, I was just thinking about this from, I think better forecasting, better weather forecasting, for instance, or climate forecasting is something we could really use as well. I mean, we in the west side, we don't know how much water we're going to get until, last year I think our initial allocation was in February. We're having to make planning decisions on pure guesswork. We have educated guesswork, but we're making decisions on how many acres we're going to plant of tomatoes or cotton, and we're betting things up, and we're putting expenses into it, and we don't even know how much water we're going to get. So I think improved forecasting of water flows through the delta, and again better climate monitoring would really help as well, and it would help all water districts, I think, to better time their releases. To better know how much water they can release safely, because once that water is released and then we don't put it to use, we don't put it either in the ground as recharge or utilize it on a crop, it's gone. And that's a really sad situation where I know that there has to be a certain amount of flow that maintains through the delta and goes out to sea. That there are certain environmental things that we that we need to do and we should be doing. But we also need to maintain and make sure we're managing things as effectively as we can to make sure we can still continue to feed the world.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I'm a stickler for time, and so I really don't want to go over. So if there's been anything else you want to wrap up with, or
I think
no, like I said, I'm just me or Ben, you want to wrap up? Or?
Well, I was making sure I wasn't forgetting nothing from Ben's perspective, but and then I was going to have you do your final comment. So
sure, go ahead, Ben.
Go ahead, Daniel. No, I don't have too much to contribute.
Okay. No, I'm like I said, I just feel so blessed to be a part of this industry. Folks always ask me, why do you get into agriculture? Why do you get into agriculture? Why are you a part of this industry? And for me, it's just the people. I love the people I work with. I love the people in this industry. I love the fact that you can still shake somebody's hand and make a deal. There's not a lot of businesses where you can still do that and have it mean something. So again, if I have anything I want to say, I'm bullish on the future of agriculture, just because I know the people, the hard work that goes into it, and I just know the quality of people that are part of this industry.
Well, don't forget though, we do elbow bumps for deals now. So
that's a good point. That's a good point. Yeah, no, or hand sanitizer first, I guess. So.
Well, thank you very much, Daniel, and thank you to the Wet Center for hosting this today. Again, no shortage of issues. Daniel and I could BS for, I'm sure, the next couple of hours just on everything that's going on there, but tried to condense it into some of the big things that we're dealing with as an industry, and very appreciative of the opportunity to be able to do this.
Ryan and Daniel, want to thank you both so much for taking the time to speak today. We covered a lot of great subjects today, so this was an excellent session.
I appreciate it. Thanks so much.
All right, and the audience, thanks for coming. And next month we will have Eric Olson with Jane Irrigation talking about the state of the industry with irrigation. So make sure to attend that. Again, thank you everyone for attending, and we'll see you in a month.
Appreciate it. Thank you.